Okay, we got a 2002 Honda Odyssey, 5-speed automatic. This one had been sitting for a little while, right around 8 months or so, and so got a little rusty with you see the brake rotors and the axles, and just every single bolt on this thing was just a pain in the neck. Getting this cradle out was not fun either. But anyway, got the transmission out and kind of show you what we found here. Let's walk over to the bench, and we got the transmission all torn apart. Anyway, this is a 5-speed from 2002 and up. I can't remember how many years ago, but they put the Honda put 5-speed in these Odesseys, and then I want to say from 97 for the first year of production all the way to 2001. They were a 4-speed, and that 4-speed usually is a B7TA designation code. This one is a BYBA 5-speed designation code. And you can tell right now, look at that converter. That thing is pretty rusty on the outside, but on the flip side, it's pretty blue. And so this is a very common Honda issue with the converter burning up, and because of a lack of lube due to the pressure regulator valve and other factors. And actually, when we went to drain this one out, we only got about 1.5 quarts or so out of it. So it looks like there was a little bit of leak that was coming out of the axle seal. You got one on this side here. It was actually the one on the opposite side, and that could have been causing somewhat of a cause a fluid leak out. The customer didn't pay attention to it, and I think kind of led up to that thing happening, but also some other things happening. I'll show you. First thing, with the lack of lube and no lubrication, this bearing on the differential here is just completely mangled. Let's see if I can get a good shot of that. Yeah, this bearing is completely gone. We're gonna have to replace this bearing on this differential housing. The one on the other side is okay. That one actually sits a little more deep into the transmission where it gets better lubrication, but that one did not. And that one actually goes against this guy here, and this has got a little bit of scarring in this washer, which is fine. It's just a protective washer, but we'll replace that cone that goes with this bearing. Of course, then we're looking at our clutch sets here. This one here is our low, they call it a low coast clutch, and then this one here is the first gear clutch. And so what this thing was doing, you go to put it in gear, you had no engagement, you rev it up, it would finally move and take off, and that's why these clutches are just smoked. And the steel plates, no good there. Same thing with the hold clutches, they're getting pretty smoked too. So anyway, and I'll kind of show you why that happened. And then these are the 4th and 5th clutches. They were okay. And then also the 3rd set clutches. And this is usually the one set of clutches that normally would go out on this transmission when you start to have problems. Usually on a 4-speed, 2nd gear is usually the first common notice of a transmission failure when it starts to slip into 2nd. And a lot of times that'll happen either when it's cold or when it's warm. A lot of times when it's cold, it'll slip really bad, and then when it warms up, the fluid gets thinner, and it actually helps increase pressure, and then it kind of goes away. But on a 5-speed, usually it's the 3rd gear that'll do the same thing. So if you got to slip into 3rd, most likely these clutches would sit in this drum that sits on the outside of that transmission case, on the back side of it. That's where this drum sits, and that's the one that will have issues. And then, of course, on the 4-speed, they all are inside the transmission. And then, of course, this thing, being that it's a 5-speed, does have a one-way clutch. That's what these clutches apply to. And so it just rotates one and locks the other way. And sometimes these go out. If you're starting to have an issue where you either have a delay engagement and then finally goes, even though if you give it gas, it'll go right away, you may have an issue here. And then also, if you're coming to a stop and the vehicle feels like it goes in the neutral, this is also a problem. But let's get back to what our main focus is here's the pressure regulator valve body assembly, and that's the pressure regulator valve right there. And that guy is stuck in there. I can get it into it with a pair of needle nose pliers and get it out, but these things are just supposed to drop right out. It's not moving. No way, no how. So she's in there, and so it needs to get cleaned up, and I'll have to actually update it with a newer valve, or if it still looks like it's not any good, then I'm going to take this thing over and get an oversized valve put in. I'll have it reamed out, and there's 2 sets of oversized they can do on these if these things really wear out. These other 2 valves here are for the torque converter. They seem to be okay. I'll also have to check them for wear. If they're worn out, same thing. I'll update it. Sometimes I can actually get a complete valve body ready to go, completely updated with oversized valves, cheaper than having them done. So we'll have to see which way we'll go as far as that goes. And then, of course, with these clutches being burnt, it's caused by what's called the clutch pressure control valves, and that's these 2 guys right here, A and B. And there's also a C, and I think it's I can't remember if it's in this one. Yeah, it's in the main valve body. But this one here, these 2 valves, kind of the same thing. They're supposed to just drop out of there. They are really, really stuck in there. So it's going to take me some time to get these suckers out. And of course, I'll replace those valves and also the end plugs that go on the end here. They go right on the end. The Sonics makes an update kit that you can put plugs in with little O-rings to keep these valves from leaking oil out, and at that point can give you like a slow start or kind of a slip too if it's leaking fluid out of there. So that's part of an update you can do on these 2. If you guys get on Hiram Gutierrez YouTube channel, he's another transmission builder out of Houston. He's got a very good video on how these things get stuck and how to clean them out with bench buddies, and also updating them with the Sonics end plugs. And then he also has a pretty good diagram explanation of how this pressure control valve works, and what happens when it starts to get stuck. And so, but instead of me complaining or explaining it all over again, I'll just refer you to that guy. He's pretty knowledgeable on a lot of these Hondas and what to do on these things. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and get this thing all updated, cleaned up, new plates and steel plates. If you are doing this as a do-it-yourselfer, highly recommend that you always replace the steel plates when doing these. The clutch clearances are so small. Most of these clutch packs have a maximum clutch plate clearance of 8 thousandths from 0 to 8. So if you have any of these plates here that have worn down a bit, and you start adding them together, you can lose 2 or 3 thousandths there, and then all of a sudden, within a year or so, your transmission is starting to go out again because it'll end up losing clearance. So definitely replace the steel plates, mostly on Hondas. I know it's cost a little bit more money, but it's definitely insurance in the long run. And then, of course, do the updates, get this transmission where it's fixed, and it'll stay on the road for you. All right. Hope you enjoy this video. Thanks.